How's it going, everybody? It's John again with Crippled Fox Gaming. Get stuff set up here, and I will show you the technique I use to paint the hedges from the terrain crate from the battle box set. And it is a pretty easy process. There's a lot of different colors I'm using for this. So what I've done is I've prepped each color, and I'll show you how that works as I go through it. And the way I start off with pretty much everything I do, unless it's like the buildings that I was doing, is I prime everything in white. And these are the hedges that they've got out of the terrain crate battle box. This is a good thing for hedgerows along a road, or if you want to, I'm going to use them for a kind of a secluded garden kind of thing. I've got the temple stuff that I'm going to be doing, and I'll show you all that stuff later. But this is basically how I'm going to be doing this. I'm trying to make sure everything stays in focus as we go. The way I started this is I used, I've got the Citadel Caliban Green, and that is basically going to be the base coat for all of the shrub, and all of the shrubbery that I'm going to be painting this thing. And it is, literally just a base coat, so I'm going to just dab on as much as I can and try and kind of get it into all the little nooks and crannies and all this stuff in here. And I've found that as I go along, there gets little bubbles in the paint sometimes, and then I have to go back over and redo it. But the good thing about a hedge, if you actually look at a natural bush or shrubbery or something like that, there's a lot of different colors of green in there. I've got 4 shades that I'm using here to kind of work from the base up, and I'm just going to I'm just going on through, and I'm just going to dollop all this stuff on here. And then I've got 7 of these things I've got to paint. There's the 7 different steps that I'll show you as we're going through this, and I'll probably just prattle on as I am wont to do as usual. But I really like how these turned out. I did have to go along the top. You can't really see it. Some of the molds, when these get pressed together, there's a little bit of a gap along this top here. And what I did, I just took some green stuff and kind of filled those in. And then what else I did is I would take another one of these hedges, and since they're so textured, I just kind of went over it where I could and just kind of pressed that onto the top of where the green stuff was, so it wasn't quite so smooth, and it kind of just makes its own texture fill in there. And I did that too, probably 2 or 3 of these things, I think, and then it turned out okay. You let them, and the main thing is that I have a problem with is letting everything dry. I get a little bit anxious. It's like, let's get this stuff done, and then I don't let stuff dry properly, and then I end up just cursing myself and going back over it again. And like I said, I'm just kind of not quite stippling, but I'm dabbing this brush into there because there's a lot of little areas inside these. They're very well textured, these sculpts, but sometimes you'll miss some spots where, like I said, you'll get little bubbles in there, and I'll go back over and just go over them. But like I said, since you're doing stuff with green, you don't necessarily have to go over it with the same color as is down on the bottom, because there's a lot of there's a lot of variety and color in a regular bush or anything natural. And that's another thing I like about this stuff, is it's natural coloring tends to not be, unless you're talking about butterflies and stuff like that. Natural colors like rocks and stuff like that have a tendency to be very very varied. Yeah, sure, that's a thing. So that's got the base coat on this. I'm going to set this back and I'll let that dry. I'm going to put that up here with my finished one, and hopefully I don't get my green fingers all over this other thing. I see a lot of people use gloves on these things, but I've always, you get oils from your hands on things. I find that when I would ever try to paint with gloves or anything like that, I don't know if I'm just gripping stuff too hard or what the deal is, but it just ends up getting rubbed off anyway, and I'll end up getting enough paint on my fingers that it doesn't really doesn't make a difference to the finished product. And like I said, I've got each step kind of set aside to so I can kind of show you the process and the colors that I've used. Like I said, that first one was the Caliban Green, the Citadel's Caliban Green. This is a dried one, and as you can see, there's little white bits in there that they had the little bubbles in there, probably from the paint. And so what my next shade is, the next lighter shade I'm going to use is the Death World Forest. Again, it's a Citadel. It's a base coat. Know how well that focuses on that thing, but I'm just going to throw this on there, and this I'm going to do a lighter dry brush. So this brush, this big wide brush that I used is still kind of wet, so I am going to grab, hey look, I've got another brush just in case. So I'm going to use that, and I did not rinse that out. Well, here you go. Here's how you dry brush with a semi paint soaked brush. Yeah, warts and all, I'm telling you. If I ever learn how to edit, you guys are all going to be in trouble. So I'm just going to dry brush over the tops of this, and that's basically catching the tops of all of the texture. Like I said, there's going to be some little bits I'm going to just kind of get in there and dab that off. But I'm just going to kind of go over this. I don't know how well that contrasts on my camera phone. My phone camera? Sure. And I'm just going to kind of go over this, and I will highlight all of this. And that will give it a little bit of depth. Like I said, I'm going to go in there and fill in those things because, like I said, not everything, nature is not the most perfect of colored palettes. Boy, I'm just talking to be talking, aren't I? So I'm just going to keep painting then, rather than sitting here and trying to fill in time with uncomfortable silence. I'll probably just keep talking as I paint. And like I said, you don't want I'm not dabbing in there. And actually, if you look, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different trunks in these things, and you can kind of see there's little areas in here where there's probably going to be the shadow between the bushes, so they're not quite so full. And I'm kind of going as I'm going over these things. I'll kind of fill in that, and I won't go in where those little divots are because it's going to be a little bit darker in there. And like I said, I'm just going to kind of go over these things as I go and kind of just get a little bit of a variety of color in there. And don't forget the top, because as you're looking down on these things from your tabletop, people are going to look, you're not looking at them like this because you're not down eyeball level as often as I'd like to be. And I'm also, 6'5", so I don't get down that low. So the next phase, like I said, we've got the Caliban Green, and then I went with the Death World Forest, which is kind of a khaki, kind of olivey green. And so this one has dried, and so I'm going to use this same brush, since it's already got a little bit of that paint on there. I'm going to go ahead and set that off to the side, and I'm going to grab this one. This one is actually, hey, it's clean and dry. I must have been paying attention to what I was doing. So this is now a pale lichen. This is from the Reaper Master Series. Sometimes I think, because Reaper kind of had a rebranding of their paints, this may be a similar color, but I don't know if they've changed the name for some of them. I've got that, there's that app that lets you keep track of what paints you have, and I think some of these, I'll go through and like some of these, where there will have been a triad. This is called X, Y, and Z triad, or the olive tone flesh triad or something like that. Some of those, when I compare them, it's like they're just close enough to be almost this other color. So there might be a little bit of similarities between two different types, two differently named colors. This I'm going to go even lighter than I did with the Death World Forest. I'm going to go over this just really, really lightly. And it's got, like I said, it's got this really big. There's a type of makeup brush, and I can't think of what it's called, but it's a very dense, there's a lot of bristles, a lot of really close bristles in those things. And it's Elf brand, I think, is what I've seen. Terry Latorco, that Terry girl, was talking about using that for dry brush, and it works really well. And I keep forgetting to stock back up on them because I know, I think they have them at Kohl's, and I know someone who works at Kohl's that I need to just talk to him and say, hey, pick me up a handful of those things. So this, like I said, this is that pale lichen, and I'm going over just the very tips of all this stuff with it. I don't know how well that's showing up. I've got better lighting this time, and I'm gradually getting these to where you can actually see what I'm doing. This, I got a little bit too much. I'm not going to worry about that in there because I may go over some of these with like a green tone. This Army Painter Quick Shade green tone, if I have some stuff that is really a glaring mistake, I'm going to go back over that. But that, like I said, I've got the tops of all of these kind of done because the light's coming down from up above. It's not a, you know, object source lighting kind of thing. And then once I've done with the pale lichen, I'm going to go over that. For the very top color of the bushes is this maggot white, and it's just, it's a white. The Reaper whites I really like because there's a linen white that I use for pretty much everything. There's a pure white. This maggot white I think is a newer color that I've got, and it's got a little bit of a green tint to it. So I think, ooh, that might go very well with the lichen, pale lichen that I've got there, and it is just a little bit better than that. And so I've got those two kind of stacked there, so I'm just going to go over this, and it'll be just that white. I'm just going to really just lightly dry brush on some of that. You can kind of see where that is. I'm going to take that up the top too. That kind of, because there's the underside of a lot of leaves. If you'll notice, if you're out walking around or something, just taking, the underside of a leaf is a lot lighter than the top side. This is kind of the chlorophyll. I don't think acts with the sun. I forget. It's been, I'm of a certain age that I've forgotten all the stuff I learned in high school. So I've got this, and I've got this, just the tips of that, the tips of the tops of those, and I think, and that's going to be pretty good. I'm going to set that down as well, and let that dry. I'm going to scooch all these up as I go, and I'll put those right there, kind of reminding me what I've covered and what I haven't. So I've got another brush here. Hey, why don't I rinse that off while I'm sitting here talking to you? And you can see, get a good look at my arm. So I get that, rinse that off. And the water is gotten a little green. I'm not going to worry about it because I'm not really doing a whole lot of light colors on this, whereas if I was going to be painting something that needed a lot of contrast, I'd be changing my water as often as I could, just to kind of get those out of there. I'll do that later. So the next thing I'm going to do, now that I've gotten the bushes, this is a finished one where all the tops dried. The next thing I'm going to do is do the stumps underneath here, the stems. Sure, stem of a bush. Yeah, that's something like the trunk. How about that? And I've got just a muddy brown, which is just kind of a nice multi-purpose brown that I've got here. And I'm just going to go over these just really quickly. I'm going to go over this one, and it is, I'm just going to get a nice base color for underneath the trunk. And I know when I was painting the wood on a previous episode, I had talked about how trees are very gray. They're a lot darker color. They're not just a straight brown. These I don't think are going to be as, these aren't, because shrubbery and stuff, they're a lot darker. They don't get as much bark on them, I think, and that's, so I'm just going to go straight brown with these. And then I will go over those with a lighter color as well. So I'm just quick brushing these things. I'm just slapping some color underneath that. I'm keeping it off the green part, but you wouldn't really see it anyway because it's so far underneath. And like I said, you're not going to be picking these things up. I'm going to have these glued down to the MDF board that I'm using to base all this stuff. So, if you want to get under there and look, boy, you are wasting both our time. And so I've got this, that, and these other little bits under here. It could be little bits where other shrubs had tried to grow and they didn't. There's a rock under this side, like here. I'm not going to worry about that because what I'm going to probably do at the end of this is just going to flock it all. Hey, flock it. So that part's done. That's the muddy brown. This is, again, muddy brown is all dry, and I am going to kind of wipe the excess paint off of that. And these are all old, really haggard brushes that I've had for who knows how long. The next color I'm going to put on is an orange brown. It's lighter than this, and it'll give it a nice highlight. And what I didn't talk about was the tops of these. There's little bits of branch sticking up out of the tops that actually, I think I will go back in because there's some of that I know I did on those other ones. But there's little branches that are sticking up that the gardener has not quite tended to properly. I'll go in there, just get these real quick. There's a little bit of white in that as well. A lot of these. I'm just going to paint those. I'm going to kind of dab down in there. Because like I said, if you can always go back over. It's a lot easier if you are, like I said, I started with white because I like the fact that if something goes wrong, I don't have to put as many coats on to cover something up. And like I said, you can almost get the highlights without having to do any work, which is right up my alley. I'm a pretty lazy painter when it comes to doing big projects like this. I want to get them in, get them out, and get them done. Anyway, back to, like I said, the orange brown. I'm gonna put that on there. And again, this is not these bottles. I'm telling you that I started getting these bottles. I'm sure somebody can look up on the internet when Reaper first started putting out paints. That's when I got 90% of these paints, and I've still got them because they just last forever and ever and ever. And they don't dry out because they are in a sealed bottle, which I really like. Although, if you take care of your paints will take care of you. And so I've got this. I think I already did that one. This was the one I was going to do. Because that one, why is that? I see. Apparently someone has snuck in and added some more stuff, or I had just forgotten. Surely it can't be my fault that I'd forgotten to do something. And these, like I said, I'm just kind of really just putting a light color on these to kind of give them a little bit of a dimension to the trunk, because the trunk's not really the most important part of these things. It's basically just keeping the bush tethered to the ground. There's I put a little bit, and these brushes, like I said, they're very old, and occasionally you can get, they don't completely cover, but say, oh, that kind of looks like a wooden grain on that. I kind of like that. So I'll do that a little bit there. I'm going to do a little bit up in this, up on the top as well. Not there. And this up in here, up in there. Kind of, if you can see, it kind of gives a little bit of a, like I said, it gives a little bit of dimension so it doesn't look quite so flat. You can kind of see where some of that brown was. Now this, I think, well, I'm getting ahead of myself. So this has already got the orange brown on it on the bottom. So this will be the last step. I think I did one too many examples. Oh, that's why, because I did this example, and then I've got my finished example. So this last thing I'm doing for the ground, just basically the turf underneath, I'm going to do the old mud, and that's one of the secret weapon weathering kind of paints that they've got, and I really like this. It's a lighter color than the muddy brown, because that's muddy brown is a brown, like a crayon brown, whereas this one, you can see it here, it's a little smokier, it's a little lighter, it's a little bit okay. Issues with that. I'm still waiting. One of these times I'm going to lance this thing right into my thumb, and I will probably have to edit quite a bit of profanity out. So there we go. But this I'm just literally going to dollop on there, and I didn't clean that off because it's going to be underneath. And like I said, this is probably, I'm going to go through and just flock all of this to match whatever the base is I'm putting this on. To like I said, I'm making kind of a little garden area, which I'm going to try to, I'll probably show you in the future once I get everything else done, because I've got a few more of these. I'll keep doing these as long as you keep liking and subscribing, and I've got gives me something to do, and I hope you enjoy these, because I sure I like doing it. I mean, I do this. I would do this, you know. I'm not going to say I'd do it for free, but I really enjoy doing it if I could. And, you know, one of those rich guys who hits the lottery is like, what are you going to do? Put this. And then I will just churn out videos, and then you'll get good and tired. I was like, what's he got now? Oh boy, this again? Nope. Sit down and do this. That little dollop is going to be just enough to finish these up. And then I will kind of show you what the final product looks like. And then what I'll do is I will go back and I will finish all of these up with everything I've done so far. And that, so there, and there, and there. I think that looks pretty good. You can see that. Like I said, it is not perfect, but then, you know, terrain is literally just things that your models are going to be fighting around. And here I have a finished product. What I might do with this, I think, let me get some of that paint off of here. I had gone over a few spots with some of the, like I said, the quick shade green tone to kind of get in. There were some white spots in there that I hadn't noticed before. And I had just kind of gone through that. And you can see there's a little bit, I used some of the, my standard Agrax Earth shade in there as well to get some darker colors in there as well. But I'm going to dull coat all this, and actually what I might do real quick is I might just go over this with a little bit of that. There's a little bit of brown in that, but if you don't say anything, I won't say anything. Go over some of these where I got a little bit too much on there. And there's a little bit on there. And that kind of gives you some of the, like I said, some of the effect of the light coming down on the top. A little bit of a highlight. I have such a problem with highlighting things to pure white. It ends up looking like you're wearing, like it's made of vinyl. Like I understand with like Batman, oh dear God, Batman miniatures or superhero miniatures where that's what they're wearing. But this, I just kind of want to keep it a little muted. And that's what, if you've seen any of my other stuff over the years, a lot of my colors are really muted. They end up getting a little bit more, it's a little bit more realistic, but like I said, I'm not painting for awards because I just don't. And that's going to be that. Like I said, I'm going to dull coat this. As you can see, there's some of this, the underneath here is a little bit shiny, but I'm going to dull coat all this stuff. And that's your 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 color fence row hedges. And I really kind of, I might get a little bit underneath here, maybe. A little bit more of that. And there. Yeah, I kind of like that. Like I said, no, that'll do. And I think that's going to be all I'm going to do on this. I'll probably go over, there we go, a little bit of that on the top where those branches are sticking out a little bit. And I might, you know, who knows, I was thinking about even, you know, making, getting some colors for like juniper berries or something like that, where you get little dots of different colors, or, you know, if you want to make them like a holly bush, which this isn't, but, you know, that would be interesting if you just put little tiny dots of color to make them kind of stand out. But I'm not doing that for these because I am just going to crank these things out. I've got a bunch of terrain to make for Adepticon, and hopefully you will be there to see it. And that's it. Like I said, I've got, if you need to go through and rewind stuff, I've shown all of what I've used for this. That's it. You know, it's 24 minutes, so that's not too bad. Like I said, hit the like and subscribe. Tell your friends, tell your family. Subscribe and subscribe often. And that's going to be it for this. Thanks a lot, you guys. I'll see you around.